Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution.
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 You want a revolution?
You say you want a revolution?
Revolution. The revolution.
It's going on right now.
Welcome to The Revolution, the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we ask today's most successful entrepreneurs to share the tools and strategies they use to build relationships and connections to grow their revenue. Now, your host for The Revolution, John Corcoran.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I'm the host of this show, and I like to joke that I'm a recovering lawyer. I spent years working in politics and as a lawyer, including as a speechwriter since in the Clinton White House and for a California governor. In 2010, I discovered this medium of podcasting. I've been doing it ever since because I get to talk to the best people. It's really amazing, the great CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs I talk with on a weekly basis. And I've talked to so many of them today. I'm also the co-founder of Rise 25, where we help B2B businesses with the strategy and production they need to create a podcast and content marketing that produces tremendous ROI and connects them with their ideal prospects and referral partners. And I want to give a quick shout out to Ed Robinson of This Stitch for recommending today's guest, which is Nick Damoulakis. He is the president and co-founder of Frederick, Maryland's Office of Orases. I said it right. Yes. And he has the privilege of leading a diverse, smart, talented group of individuals across a variety of disciplines and clients, including clients from the NFL, Major League Baseball, Johns Hopkins University, Hershey and Walter Reed Hospital. He's a creative problem solver and strategic thinker, over 20 years of experience in the digital landscape and creating custom software. He's also a thought leader in the industry, and he authored and created the Digital Framework, which is an interactive process of working with organizations to align values to their culture, leadership style, and strategic thinking. And we're going to touch on all of those different pieces as we go through this interview. But first, before we do that, this episode is brought to you by Rise 25 Media. At Rise 25, we help B2B businesses to get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with done-for-you podcasts and content marketing. And we specialize in helping B2B businesses with the high client lifetime value. So to learn more about how to do that and get some inspiration about how you can get clients, referrals, and some of the best friendships of your life from a podcast, go to rise25media.com. All right, Nick. So I know it took a long time for us to nail down this episode recording, but I'm excited to talk to you about this. So take me back to your childhood, because we were talking beforehand about this, and your father was a big inspiration for you. He was an immigrant who came to this country from a small island in Greece, which is no easy task at any time, any generation. What was that like growing up with an immigrant father, looking up to him?
Yeah, it's a great question, especially with everything going on today, right? And some of the work we're doing today, giving back to people that come to the United States with justice, which is something that we'll talk about in the future here. But yeah, my dad came to the United States in the late 60s, went to Rice University to work on engineering, and had a full ride coming from a small island of Greece out in the middle of nowhere over to Rice University, where he worked on electrical engineering and signal processing. So as a child, I always got to see him work on really interesting things. He always brought gadgets home, computers. And I used to always try to take computers apart when he left for work and put them back together before he got home. Most of the times I was successful. I got in trouble a couple times, but it was fun. But, one of the greatest things is just having access to technology, to back then AOL and Prodigy, So that was a big part of seeing that. But one of the big things that he left was really just seeing the work ethic. Here's a person that doesn't have the same means that we all have today in the U.S. Someone that they weren't sure when they were eating. There was the floors in their house was dirt. There weren't even floors. So it's different. And I think he always kept that, hey, just keep working hard, keep working hard. He was never an entrepreneur. He was a producer. He did some great stuff. One of the things that he did in the 70s was worked on getting the Apollo 13 back to the United States. And that was one of his theories that NASA used to sling the Apollo around the moon and bring it back to Earth with as little electricity as possible.
Wow. So he was he working for NASA at the time?
It was Rice University on their PhD program with NASA and the Houston, Houston down there and all that. Worked at several Texas Instruments, Gould, Martin Marietta back then. Wow. But yeah, so I'm not sure exactly which place he was at, but always worked hard and got it done. And, growing up, I was never the smartest guy in school. But so I knew, it was one of those things where you knew you could never outsmart him because that just wasn't what I was about. But I brought different characteristics to the table. I was able to work with people and take on projects at a young age, whether if it was being a newspaper boy or doing a lot of yard work, snow blowing, whatever. I was always able to get a group of people together and make money doing work at an early age. So two different paths. One, someone getting into the details and getting it done, and another one getting groups of people together and then getting them organized and getting them to want to do the work so we can all get paid.
Well, that's not easy to do either, especially at a young age. So were you starting like lawn mowing businesses or lawn raking businesses or things like that?
Absolutely. I think it was just a gene that, I don't know where it came from. I can't sit here and tell you it was because of this thing. But I would say I always enjoyed making money off of hard work and doing it with pride and being proud of the work that you're doing, leaving things better than how you found it. It was always enjoyable. And whenever I was able to do that with a group of people and leave a smile on a client's face, I was always happy. So I think at an early age, I kind of figured out, that was my niche. And I was always good with people. I could always work with people, get people to want to do things together. Just something that I still am passionate about.
What are some of those projects, some of those different things you did? Tell me a story from like high school or junior high.
Oh, boy. Well, I'll tell you, it varied all over the place. It started with snow blowing. We came from Chicago to Maryland, and we were the only people on the street with a snowblower. So when it snowed, we were very popular.
In demand, yeah. Yeah,
in demand. So, I would usually just tell my friends, hey, bring some gas over so we could get this thing running.
And did you go door to door, knocking on people's doors, saying $5 to clean your nice?
Absolutely,
nice.
Absolutely. So went from there. In the summer times, it was doing a paper route back when we were all on our Schwinn bikes, and there were actually paper boys, and going, getting a group of people together to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning to deliver papers. And then the worst part that they don't tell you is collecting the money.
You got to go door to door. Yeah.
Yeah. Doing collections at, 12 years old. Could you imagine that today?
Yeah, I know. Right? Yeah.
And lawn work, that turned into doing lifeguarding. That turned into working at a small restaurant, and to the point where the owner said, "You know what? I trust you. Here are the keys. We're leaving for the summer. Keep the place running."
Wow.
So a lot of fun stories, but everything I did it 100%, the best I could, and the results were there.
Yeah. And so you are actually getting your master's degree in information technology, and you start your current business on the side, right? So how did that come about?
Yeah. So I'll back up one more step because it all kind of comes together. And there's a little bit of a long story, but I promise it's worth it for many of you who have children that you're just not sure. So in high school, never was a great student. I was in high school more for the friends, the camaraderie, and I played guitar. I was a musician. So my evenings were usually at the bars at night playing guitar, and I had serious aspirations of moving to LA and being in a band like everybody wanted to do in the 80s, right? I mean, so probably a couple things in my life led me to this path, and I'll kind of go through those points. And the first one was waking up one day, and all my stuff was packed, and my dad packed the car and said, "Let's go." Got in the car, and he drove me about 3 hours into the mountains in the middle of nowhere to his little university called Frostburg State University. which if you don't know Frostburg, great school, but was basically the easiest school to get to in Maryland. And dropped me off there and said, come on with the degree or don't come home, closed the door and took off. So he actually filled out my application and got me into Frostburg, which I learned about, earlier that day. When I got there, I took, my first steps out of the car and looked around, and that was a big hit. And you pretty much have to decide one of two directions at that point: make the best of this situation or flunk out, And I chose to take that moment and make the best of it, as everything else I try to do in my life. And ended up meeting a friend, befriended a person there named Ben Young Chung, who knew computers really, really well. And I just took on, a friendship with this person. He taught me everything I knew about computers. I signed up for my first computer class with him, where we taught people how to play guitar online. That was my first project, first semester, first class, make a website, 1994.
Wow.
And 95, I'm sorry. So I built this website for this class where you could go online and you could learn how to play guitar.
Wow.
Right? Now, back then, you had to buy sheet music, which was like $6 to $8 a song, which, that was pretty salty for a college student, or for anyone back then.
Yeah. And the music itself cost money too. You had to buy CDs.
So I said, all right, let's build this website. And before I knew it, 10 people started using it. I got excited. People started submitting in how to play the music. 10 turned into 100, 100 turned into 1,000. Within 30 days, I had over 100,000 people using it, and I had over 100,000 songs in the system.
Wow.
Which led me to my next pivotal part of my life. So imagine this. You're getting dropped off in school. You can take your first class. You got a good project going on. And one day I'm working on it, and it just stopped working. And I get a phone call from the provost of Frostburg State University. Right? Now, I didn't even know what a provost was at this point.
Let me guess. You're running it on like the computer servers or something like that. I mean, the college servers probably, right? Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. And I'm doing the short version of this, but back in the day, there was only one computer.
Right.
And everything was on that computer. And that computer happened to be connected to the internet, which served not only grades and all the information at the school, HR, everything, but also was a web server, which is unheard of, right?
Right.
So this site would actually bring the server down multiple times, right? But the kicker happened on this one specific day when the provost called, and I went down to his office, and he pulled me aside and said, hey, we need to have a conversation. And he goes, you're going to wait right here, and we're going to bring you into the boardroom. I was like, oh my, a boardroom. So this is my first boardroom. I've been in several since, but this is my first introduction to a boardroom. So, probably the scariest time of my life. They opened up the double wooden doors and the long wooden table down the middle. And at the end of the table was the principal of the school, Dr. Guerra, president of the school. Great person. There were three guys in suits on one side. They introduced themselves from Sony Records, Harry Fox Agency, and BMG.
And they'd come to Frostburg State University.
It was a pleasure to meet them. They drove all the way from New York City to 4 hours to meet me at Frostburg.
And I'm sure they were equally thrilled to meet you.
Oh, absolutely. Then on the other side of the table, the provost, which is basically the person in charge of the school legal, the state attorney of Maryland, their assistant, and and my teacher.
Oh, cool. Right.
Yeah. So they said, have a seat. Okay, thank you. Basically, at the end of the day, it was the first website that had tablature online, Guitar Tab, giving it away for free. And this was very disruptive for the music industry. So they kindly asked us to take it down. I, of course, would say yes. All right. And we all shook hands. They took off, and the principal or the president looked at me, Dr. Guerra, and she said, "You need to stay here." And I thought that was it, man. I mean, I going in high school, I'd been suspended before. I knew the conversation that was happening. Yeah. And I was not happy. And I sat down, and she said, "Look, I think you know what you're doing with computers. What if we hired you and you built the first website for our school?"
Wow. Okay. That's cool.
So I got a job offer.
Yeah, that's good.
Pivotal, taking the worst thing that could happen to something positive. And they put me in a room with no windows. Is about 20 by 20 room, pretty nice size room. And they bought me anything I wanted computer wise. And my job was to build the website for the school. Once that was completed, I was then in charge of building websites for all the businesses out in Western Maryland in a resort area. And I spent 4 years doing that, learning how to talk with customers, building up their websites, their web presence. And there weren't books to tell you how to do this stuff.
No,
I mean, we were all making it up.
This is probably pre-Dreamweaver,
what were you using? Pre-Dreamweaver, macro, HTML 1.0, beta probably.
Wow.
No, there weren't many tools. And it was just such a magical time when you knew that the time you were putting in, it was magical because, the web was the canvas. You could do anything you wanted. Nothing was invented yet.
Yeah.
Amazon had a one-page bookstore up, So it was a really cool time. So for 4 years I did that. And when I graduated, there were 22 people working in that lab when I was done. And hire number 8 was a lovely woman who later became my wife, Amy. So when I graduated, now remember, I told you one thing here. I was never the smartest guy, right? So one thing I knew when I graduated, I had to move on to get a master's degree because, one, I found a passion that I loved, computer programming, but I wanted to be the best. And be the best, you have to just keep on getting educated and keep learning. And I went to the one school that I could find on the East Coast that didn't care if you took GREs or not. So that ended up being RIT for my next story. RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology. Great school. Loved it. Loved my time at Frostburg.
Before we get to that, I want to ask you, is there a part of you, even a small part of you, that regrets what happened with that early website for learning to play guitar online?
It's a great question because if I would have kept it, those sites are making millions of dollars nowadays. I don't regret it all because I can really authentically say I really don't have any regrets for decisions through my life. They've all ended up in great places. I'm very happy. And I love the journey that I've been through. I love the journey. And that was nothing more than an event that happened. And I don't know where the other path would have gone. But at the end of the day, when we settled up and I told them I wouldn't do it anymore, I actually gave all the code to a company a school up in North Dakota, and they created the online guitar archives, and it just became a whole nother beast. So it was like a little baby that just blew up to something bigger. So cool. I was happy for that. Yeah. The pro of it, the story got in the New York Times. So, during that time I was getting job offers left and right, but I always knew there would be a bubble pop. Just
at some point.
Always knew.
Yeah.
Always knew.
Which did happen. The .com bubble. It actually kind of burst around the time you were getting your master's, right? So you're getting your master's, and you actually start your current business in the midst of that period of time, right?
Very true.
In January of 2000, which at that time, what was everyone talking about? Y2K. So tell me, did you open up like saying, I'm going to solve the Y2K problem in January 2000? I'm going to have nothing but business?
Well, I'll tell you this. I was building websites out of my dorm room as well. So not only was I working 40-hour weeks, going to school full-time undergrad, but I was also working at night just doing some projects. And my first client, paying client, was the guy who invented the Elvis Presley stamp back in 98, 90, somewhere around there. And he was my first client where I put that online for him and his company. And he used to come to my dorm room and I'd say, how does this look? And he'd say, yeah, it's good, you know. So you know, that was my freelancing time. When I went to Frostburg, from Frostburg to RIT, back then they did interviews. You know, so they obviously looked at your grades, looked at your transcripts, talked to your teachers, make sure you were, you know, ready for the master's program. But really, they wanted to check and have an interview with you. And this is just another crazy story. My girlfriend at the time, now wife, got in the car together and we're like, let's go get a master's degree. And we went to RIT. And we drove 8 hours to Rochester, New York. And we get there. And they're like, all right, why don't you both come into the interview? And I'm like, that's kind of odd, but okay. So we get in there and we're having our interview, and the professor just is not just mentally not in the conversation, right? Now, I was fortunate enough where I got to work with clients, and I could tell when people were interested or not interested. And I was like, this is just weird. And I just asked them, I said, I got to pause for a moment. We just drove 8 hours for this interview. And I'm sorry, but I'm just not feeling the energy from you at all.
Wow. That's a brazen thing to say.
Yeah. Well, he stepped back and he said, you're right. He goes, 30 minutes prior to this meeting, I found out that my TA was caught cheating. And I just had to let go a TA who had a full ride to this school, and he's getting kicked out of this master's program. Not only that, I have, 2 months to find someone to teach a programming language called Lingo. And I don't know where I'm going to find this person. Now, let me tell you something, John. I know an opportunity is knocking. I looked that guy square in the eyes and said, I know Lingo and I can teach that.
Did you?
No, I didn't even know what Lingo was. So he accepted my gracious offer, shook my hand and said, you know what? We talked a little bit more, but he said, you're in. Not only are you in, I need you to start in 2 weeks and you'll be teaching Lingo to the undergrads. So my wife was also accepted. And on the ride back, my wife looked at him, or my girlfriend at the time, she's like, you don't know Lingo. I said, yeah, but we'll just get a book and figure it out.
That's funny.
So we went back up there and I taught Lingo and got our master's degree. And during that time, that was just 99 roughly. When I was teaching at RIT, one of the people in my classes went to work at Xerox, and Xerox needed a website. And I was teaching how to make websites. And she said, our company's looking. I said, well, I'll tell you what, I can freelance and do that for you. And she took me up on the offer. And my wife and I would literally wake up at 6 a.m. We would work with Xerox. Around 4 o'clock, we'd go to school or I would go to school to teach my classes. And then we did night school for ourselves. So we were in school from like 6 to 9 or 6 to 10. We worked till about 2 o'clock in the morning, and we did that all through our masters. That's how we lived.
Wow.
Putting in the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this was right around the time that the .com bubble burst. And
it was.
I was actually in school. So I went to law school from 2004 to 2007, which was a time when the economy was not doing that well. And it wasn't a bad time to be in academia. But you also started a business at the time. So what was that period of time like, one, being in academia when the bubble was bursting, and two, starting a business on the side right before or as the bubble was bursting?
So this would have been 2000. So in 99, we decided, hey, we need to formalize and become a company. We had one client, Xerox, and that was enough for us and some, right?
Yeah.
So I had an introduction to a few things. Number one, Amy, my now wife, came up to me and said, you know what, this work thing, you're kind of just making money on me paying $50 an hour, but selling me at $100 an hour. I don't think this is going to work out. So I said, okay, I tell you what, if you buy a Mac computer, you can have 50% of the business. So her buy into the company was a Mac computer. I wish I would have kept that computer. It would have been the most expensive computer, now worth millions.
Good thing you married her.
Yeah. And so we said, all right, let's start this company. And we started in 2000. We just split down the middle. She worked with the clients, did the project management. She also could code, but was better with talking with clients, getting the specifications down, what we were doing, and then I would code it. And we just worked like that constantly. Now, you got to remember a couple things. We're getting our master's right out of school from our undergrad, so we have nothing, right? Which is the happiest time of anybody's life, to have nothing, because there's nothing to lose,
right.
So, I didn't really understand economics, the economy, what really was happening. I was kind of blind to it. I was so busy working, and we had our one client, and we just made stuff happen. And what I learned about was when you make money, you pay a lot of taxes. So that's what I learned about.
Painful bills there where you didn't
we had
set
some
aside?
painful bills because we weren't a formal company before 2000. Yeah. We were independent, contractors, and we paid a hefty fee.
Right.
And that's when we learned on, becoming an S corp and moving forward and learning the taxes.
That's a hard lesson. Hard lesson the first time you learn it. Yeah.
I paid a lot of taxes. I paid a lot of taxes.
So
we didn't have any write-offs. We had nothing, right. So it was interesting.
Your wife still works in the business 20 years later. You guys still work together. Yeah. What is that like, 20 years of working together and, of course, being married?
It's the yin yang, man. It's we do two very different things. We're two polar opposites, as any great marriages or partnerships. So I'm big picture. All about the fun, the culture, the bigger, faster, better every time. And she's all about the details on the specifics. So the two of us work great together.
Nice.
Now, over the course of 20 years, I'll tell you this, she does this work over here on the right-hand side, and I do all the work on the left-hand side. So we don't work together that much during the day. It's just when the two cross,
Yeah.
So, we our first apartment, she was in one corner and I was in the other corner. And if we wanted to talk, we would actually IM each other through, AOL IM or whatever back in the day.
Yeah.
Or IRC, that's how we communicated. But, this is what made it work. She did her work better than I could do. So I knew it was in good hands, and she knew that vice versa on the work I did. And that's what made it work.
Yeah. Yeah. Now with the company, I know that there was a point that you felt like you needed to improve the culture, which is something that you're really passionate about now. Yeah. You've been running the company for a number of years. How did you go about, one, coming to that conclusion, and two, what did you do about it?
Yeah, great question. So let's go back. So from 2000 we started, and then let's fast forward all the way to roughly about 2008. So we built websites. That's what we did. And we were really, really good at it. Really good. But the problem is we were hiring programmers that were really good that were getting bored with just websites. There's only so much you can do. No offense to web developers and so forth, but again, for me, I'm always bigger, faster, better. I wanted more and more and more, and I was really getting bored with talking about making the logo bigger or the color blue needs to be darker. That didn't excite me, and at that time, we had about 10 employees, and I didn't know how to lead them. I would lead almost, I'd say, you can lead with a fire under someone or a fire inside someone to do their work and get better at their career. And I only knew how to light a fire under someone, really.
Scare them.
Yeah. And it didn't work. It was horrible. The culture was bad. Turnover was bad. More importantly, I wasn't having fun. And, around 2008, probably one of the worst things happened. We talk about 2000 being a dip. Well, 2008, I had 8 years of learning about the economy, and another recession happened. And we had a client. We were maybe only $1 million, $1.2 million company. And we had a client who didn't want to pay a bill for $450,000.
Oof. Wow.
Yeah, imagine what that does to your psyche, right? So I didn't do well. I went in a deep depression. I pretty much didn't get out of bed for 30 days. I didn't know how to handle it. The pressures of everything just all collapsed on me. And one day my wife just got me out of bed. She's like, "You got to go do something. Do something." Meanwhile, she was keeping things running, making it all happen. She's like, "You got to get out." So I went to a friend of mine, invited me to hear about a speaker. And that speaker, I went to go see, looking for any hope. And that one speaker turned me around and turned my worst situation into probably one of the best lessons that I keep on today. And that happened to be through Vistage. And that was going to my first meeting with Ed Robinson, my coach, who's still my coach, 10 years later. Yeah. So that was a big part.
And what was it? Do you remember what he talked about during that speech?
Yeah. Crystal clear, man. It was about your triggers. It was about, what are your triggers? Why are you triggered right now? Why can't you get out of bed? Why can't you do this? And looking at that opportunity, and in my past, I always told you I look at opportunities and I always made the best of it. Well, I didn't make the best of this. And when he dissected my psyche and myself, we said, "Hey, yes, this person owes you $450,000 and they're not paying. Find a way to get out of it." And I called the person up and I said, "Tell you what, you keep your $450,000, and what if we go to the client direct?" And that client happened to have about $500,000 of work that we could do. And if we did that work just perfect, right? Perfect, we'd break even. Right? So, I knew this person wasn't going to pay. I knew this wasn't going anywhere. So we signed a piece of paper that said, "You know what? We won't talk about it. We'll take on, you're free of paying the $450, but we're going after the client direct now. And you're going to make the introduction and get out of the middle, and we'll call it a day."
Got it.
And fast forward, that client ended up becoming the NFL. Wow. And that also ended up being two of the most famous projects we've done on getting them on a paperless system, and they're still a client today.
Wow.
So we did our job. We did it well. We got out of that. In the process, coming out of a massive depression, coming out of knowing what triggers you, and learning that process of rebuilding yourself as a leader and then rebuilding your company is a process. And I documented that process. And coming out of that, I created a framework that I work with other clients and CEOs that are in a slump and don't know how to get their company aligned. And I did that for about 6 years until I moved on to something else that excited me. Mm-hmm. So I started working around 2010 to about 2006 with friends, CEOs, clients who had CEOs that were in the way of making their company successful, not knowing their values, their vision, their mission, aligning them with their team. And I kind of did it as a side hustle. And I did about 45 of those projects. And at the end, I was getting paid about $15,000 a day to do them.
Wow.
And I loved it. I haven't done them in years, 4 years now, but it was a time in my life where, again, you take the worst and then you make it better, and it was a process.
Yeah. I want to ask you, so we're recording this in late October of 2020, the global pandemic from COVID-19 is continuing to affect all of us. What, you talk about culture and, the impact that obviously meeting Vistage and Ed Robinson had on you. A lot of companies are struggling these days with building virtual culture. Having a company that, obviously people are bonded, they want to work for the company, they buy into the mission, all that kind of stuff. What advice do you have for companies that find themselves virtual these days and want a strong culture?
Yeah, it's great. Well, the first thing is you can't lead unless you know yourself really, really well. So you have to figure out what your purpose statement is, what your personal priorities are, what your values are. Because until you figure that out, you can't lead with full authenticity. Because you don't know who you are. And if you don't know who you are, you don't know what you stand for yet when difficult times arise. So I'm a big fan. The first step, know yourself. Have a personal statement that summarizes what's most important for you. Know your values. Know your priorities in life. And stick to it. Write it down. So I would say that's the first part. Hands down. The second part, and I'll go to the book Drive from Daniel Pink, which
Great
is
book.
Another piece. Yeah, another piece. And
great past guest on this podcast 2 times. Yeah, lives near you.
And yeah, absolutely. And he actually came up and spoke at one of the events we put on up here. But that was another pivotal part. Once I understood who I was looking for, okay, how do I inspire others properly?
Yeah. And
there's a couple things I learned. Number one was from his book, giving people mastery. Yep. So, I had to make an environment where they could get training to be the best. So what did I do? I searched around. This is another crazy story, man. We're going down rabbit holes. But mastery, number one, basically training your people. So I wrote a grant to the state of Maryland saying, tell you what if the state of Maryland gave money to CEOs to train people instead of giving it to places like Workforce Services? And what if you held us accountable for the results, making sure that people are getting higher paying jobs, that they're being promoted in their companies, and that the stuff they're learning is actually something that's employable, that makes them a higher asset? State of Maryland said, okay, let's try it. Love the state of Maryland, man. They did a great job with this, and they trusted us with $150,000. It was so successful, they gave us another $150,000, then another. Now we're up to $750,000. We had to create a nonprofit. Wow. And that allows small businesses to get the training they need to give their people the mastery. So number one was mastery, right? So attack it it hard. There's ways to get your people training. Number two is autonomy. You got to give people autonomy to do their job. You can't micromanage people, So we had to set up a culture and an environment where we're doing really complex projects, but you got to let people fail on their own. You got to let people think big. You got to let them fail cheap, fail fast. We're all about that. But you got to give them autonomy. And so when you give people mastery and autonomy, you got a magical piece there. And then the biggest one of those two is give them purpose. So we started changing the work we were going after and how we sold it to our people. When we closed the project, we didn't say, hey, we're building a case management system for the Association of Immigration Lawyers. No, we changed it to, hey, you get to be part of allowing immigrants to get justice to come to the United States the right way. Let's be part of that. And that's when we have team members in our organization that are raising their hand saying, I want to be part of that project. I want to wake up every day and be part of that purpose and that mission. And that's when things really changed. So he did a great job on summarizing it. So you got to have that part. The next thing I figured out, which was really important, especially during COVID, are three big things that really bring a heartbeat to the organization. You got to build safety so everyone's comfortable in the working environment. You got to build that safety environment. Not just safety from COVID, but just that safe feeling where when you're with your team, they got you. Mm-hmm. There's no one else I want to be in the foxhole with than this team. This is it, right? And how do you do that? You got to get vulnerable, right? Leaders, managers, directors, I don't care who you are. And it starts at the top. You got to share. You got to get vulnerable, show that no one's perfect, and you really got to let go. That's one of the first steps you got to do for that safety. And then the third is going back to Daniel Pink. He summarized it very easily. Purpose. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you share the vulnerability, you make it a safe environment, you give people purpose, you're going to have a great culture. How you do that during COVID, up to you. That's going to come from your unique leadership, from your personal priorities, your values, your purpose statement. You'll figure it out. Spend some time on it. Yeah,
that's a great book. I recommend that to so many people. Drive is a wonderful book by Dan Pink. We're running a little short on time, so I want to wrap things up with two questions. So second to last question is, I'm a big believer in gratitude, expressing your gratitude to others. As you look around at, other peers, maybe other founders or CEOs in your Vistage groups over the years, other entrepreneurs, or people in your industry that you've looked up to, that you've learned from, you admire the business that they built, who comes to mind?
Man, we're getting deep here, huh?
Wait until the next one.
Who comes? I would probably have to say my wife at the end of the day. From thick and thin, from the beginning where we had no clue what we were doing, starting a company, to her going through that time of me going through my journey of a depression and figuring out how to get out of it. She was always there. So I hope other people in the world can find somebody that gives what they need to get through the journey of life.
That's great. And then the last question, let's pretend we're at an awards banquet, much like the Oscars or the Emmys, and you're receiving an award for lifetime achievement for everything you've done up until this point. And who do you thank? Not just, sure, your wife, I imagine, your father, but who else are the mentors along the way, the professors, the provosts, the people that you would acknowledge in your remarks?
It's all the people in the story that I gave to you today. There's so many pivotal parts of my life that happened, but at the end of the day, none of this would have been possible without the leadership team here at Orases that we have, without the team members. None of it would exist. None of it would have been possible. So without them believing in myself as a leader, them taking the journey with me, being part of this through the ups and downs. Every year, we get up there and we say, hey, here's our goals for next year. This is what we're going to do. They all look at me like, oh my gosh, we're doing that? Is that even possible? And every year we do it. Every single year. So, it's the team here. It's the team. I love them. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Nick, where can people go to learn more about you and learn more about your company?
Sure. I mean, for those who are interested, we are Orases, a software development company based in Frederick, Maryland, just north of DC, about an hour west of Baltimore. All of our software developers are here in the U.S. We don't outsource anything across seas. We're 100% focused on quality. That is what we're about. We have the lowest turnover at 4.2% over 10 years in an industry where there's 30% turnover. Clutch has ranked us the top 5 software development companies for 3 years in a row out of 20,000 other firms across the world. We're Inc. 5000 company, 3 years running. At the end of the day, we love complex problems. We love building apps. We love building complex websites. Complex projects is what we're about. And so you can learn more at Orases, ORASES.com.
Nick, I loved hearing your story. Thanks so much for sharing it.
Thank you, John.
Thank you for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast with John Corcoran. Find out more at smartbusinessrevolution.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list and join the revolution.
Revolution.
And be listening for the next episode of the Smart Business Revolution podcast.